Brave New World, Chapter 9. Lenina felt herself entitled, after this day of queerness and terror, to a complete and absolute holiday. As soon as they got back to the rest house, she swallowed 6 half-gram tablets of soma, lay down on her bed, and within 10 minutes had embarked for lunar eternity. It would be 18 hours at the least before she was in time again. Bernard, meanwhile, lay pensive and wide eyed in the dark. It was long after midnight before he fell asleep, long after midnight, but his insomnia had not been fruitless. He had a plan. Punctually on the following morning at 10 o'clock, the green uniformed octoroon stepped out of his helicopter. Bernard was waiting for him among the agaves. Ms. Crown's gone on summer holiday, he explained. Can hardly be back before 5, which leaves us 7 hours. He could fly to Santa Fe, do all the business he had to do, and be in Malpais again long before she woke up. She'll be quite safe here by herself. Safe as helicopters, the octoroon assured him. They climbed into the machine and started off at once. At 10:34, they landed on the roof of the Santa Fe post office. At 10:37, Bernard had gotten through to the World Controller's office in Whitehall. At 10:39, he was speaking to his Fordship's fourth personal secretary. At 10:44, he was repeating his story to the first secretary. And at 10:47 and a half, it was the deep, resonant voice of Mustafa Mond himself that sounded in his ears. I venture to think, stammered Bernard, that your Fordship might find the matter of sufficient scientific interest. Yes, I do find it of sufficient scientific interest, said the deep voice. Bring these two individuals back to London with you. Your Fordship is aware that I shall need a special permit. The necessary orders, said Mustapha Mon, are being sent to the warden of the reservation at this moment. You will proceed at once to the warden's office. Good morning, Mr. Marks. There was silence. Bernard hung up the receiver and hurried up to the roof. Warden's office, he said to the gamma green octoroon. At 10:54, Bernard was shaking hands with the warden. Delighted, Mr. Marks, delighted. His boom was deferential. We have just received special orders. I know, said Bernard, interrupting him. I was talking to his Fordship on the phone a moment ago. His bored tone implied that he was in the habit of talking to his Fordship every day of the week. He dropped into a chair. If you'll kindly take all the necessary steps as soon as possible, he emphatically repeated. He was thoroughly enjoying himself. At 11:03, he had all the necessary papers in his pocket. So long, he said patronizingly to the warden, who had accompanied him as far as the lift gates. So long. He walked across to the hotel, had a bath, a vibrovac massage, and an electrolytic shave, listened in on the morning news, looked in for half an hour on the televisor, ate a leisured luncheon, and at 2:30 flew back with Dr. Roon to Malpai. The young man stood outside the rest house. Bernard, he called. Bernard! There was no answer. Noiseless, on his deerskin moccasins, he ran up the steps and tried the door. The door was locked. They were gone. Gone! It was the most terrible thing that had ever happened to him. She had asked him to come and see them, and now they were gone. He sat down on the steps and cried. Half an hour later, it occurred to him to look through the window. The first thing he saw was a green suitcase with the initials L.C. painted on the lid. Joy flared up like fire within him. He picked up a stone. The smashed glass tinkled on the floor. A moment later, he was inside the room. He opened the green suitcase, and all at once he was breathing Lenina's perfume, filling his lungs with her essential being. His heart beat wildly. For a moment he was almost faint. Then, bending over the precious box, he touched. He lifted into the light. He examined. The zippers on Lenina's spare pair of viscous velveteen shorts were at first a puzzle, then solved, a delight. Zip, and then zip zip, and then zip. He was enchanted. Her green slippers were the most beautiful things he had ever seen. He unfolded a pair of zipicam Zipicaminics, blushed, put them hastily away again, but kissed a perfumed acetate handkerchief and wound a scarf round his neck. Opening a box, he split a cloud of scented powder. His hands were floury with the stuff. He wiped them on his chest, on his shoulders, on his bare arms. Delicious perfume. He shut his eyes. He rubbed his cheek against his own powdered arm, touch of smooth skin against his face, scent in his nostrils of musky dust. Her real presence. Lenina, he whispered. Lenina. A noise made him start, made him guiltily turn. He crammed up his thieveries into the suitcase and shut the lid, then listened again, looked. Not a sign of life, not a sound. And yet he had certainly heard something, something like a sigh, something like the creak of a board. He tiptoed to the door, and cautiously opening it, found himself looking on to a broad landing. On the opposite side of the landing was another door, ajar. He stepped out, pushed, peeped. There, on a low bed, the sheet flung back, dressed in a pair of pink one-piece zip-pajamas, lay Lenina, fast asleep and so beautiful in the midst of her curls, so touchingly childish with her pink toes and her grave sleeping face, so trustful in the helplessness of her limp hands and melted limbs that the tears came to his eyes.